Rev up your engines! Today I'm going to show you how you might be able to fix your car by just tightening something up. Guy drove here from Nashville. Didn't idle good. And when he was driving down the road, it had hesitated high speeds and wouldn't accelerate right too. But when I opened the door and started it up, there were no check engine lights on and a seatbelt light, but that's because I didn't have the seatbelt plugged in. There. Now that's gone. As you can see, there's no lights on now other than the stupid tire pressure monitoring system. Now you want more than just simple trouble code, so I hooked up my scan tool and here's what I got. The only code that existed was U0127. Lost communication, tire pressure monitor module. So it's not going to give us a car that idles poorly or one that dies while you're driving down the road. So I'll go into live data. But the tool won't give me live data. As you can see, it says, please verify the tool is connected. Got it plugged in, and it gave me that code for the TPMS, but it will not read the live data. So what do you do then? Give up? Of course not. Scotty never gives up, and you shouldn't either. When you can't read the live data, there's one of three things wrong. Either the main computer itself has gone bad, or you have an electronic short between the data port that you plug the scanner in, the computer, or any of the sensors that power it, which could be a gigantic pain to figure out. Would have to trace everything from the data port under here to the computer inside the dash to the battery and all the wiring in the car. But before you go through all that craziness, got out my battery alternator tester and hooked it up. You want to make sure you're getting the correct power. Simple test. Negative to negative, positive to positive. There's the positive cable and there's the negative cable. Then I noticed one thing. My tester kept saying unable to connect, unable to connect. And then it got dim and then it got bright again. Now I've had that happen many times. There's only two things that do that. Either the battery itself is shot, doesn't have enough power, or one of the terminals is loose. So I grabbed the positive terminal, it was tight, but the negative one, it was loose, it was wiggling. And that inadvertently found what the problem was with the car. With a loose battery terminal, it's not going to get the right amount of power. The power is going to come, go, and even worse, a loose terminal is going to cause a lot of heat here because the connection isn't tight, so it'll get hot, kind of like a bad toaster. You could actually send voltage surges through the system and destroy things. So the first thing I'm going to do is get a 10mm ratchet and tighten it up. Now I can correctly test the battery. Guys, if I wiggle it down, I can see it's 700 cold cranking amps. So we'll start this up, cold cranking amps, and it's 700. So we'll set it to 700. Oh, we went too far. Cold weather has your fingers act up a little. 700. Okay, here we go. The state of health is pretty good, 100%, but the state of charge is a little bit low, which doesn't surprise me at all, because with that loose battery terminal, it can't recharge itself either. The battery's probably pretty good. Let's check the alternator. It could have damaged the alternator. So I'll start it up and run the alternator test. Now, as you can already see, the engine isn't shaking, it's idling pretty good. Odds are that fixed the whole thing, but you never know. That loose terminal could have caused too much internal resistance. It could have actually ruined the alternator. And as you can see, it's charging 4.37 volts and passes all the tests. So good thing the loose terminal didn't damage the alternator. The charging system's working. It's idling fine, so now let's take it for a road test, because he said it would start to kick out when he was going 50 miles an hour sometimes. So off we go. Like my father always taught me, don't assume something's fixed until you test it out. So we'll take it on a little trip in a wintry snow out in the country. Where do we get on the straightaway? And here we go. It's accelerating fine. And let's get it up to about 50. No hesitation. And the only light on is the tire pressure monitor. We already know that doesn't work, but we're making it through the snow. No problem whatsoever. Look at that. We fixed it by just tightening up a bolt. Like I say, it could have damaged the battery, could have damaged the computer, could have damaged the alternator, but since I tested them, it showed they're working okay, and now the road test is showing that the car runs perfectly fine. So we'll head out past the old red barn and go home. So what have you learned today? Sometimes something as simple as tightening up a battery terminal can fix a car that's running poorly. But also, like my father said, don't assume something is fixed until you've tested everything, and then go and road test the car to see if it still has the same complaints it had before it came in. You could have 1, 2, 3, 4 different problems. You fix one, maybe it'll fix them all, maybe not. always tested thoroughly. And speaking of testing, I'm always giving you free car information. Well, guess what? I'm giving you free testing tools now too. I'm giving away the scan tool. To have a chance to win, place a clean, non-offensive comment on the YouTube comments below, and a winner will be chosen randomly by computer to win a nice scan tool. So yes, they can fix their own car and not have to rely on a mechanic who charges $140 an hour to do the same thing. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Stretch 500 first says, Scotty, what's your take on what's going on in the power grid in Houston? Would love to hear your opinion. What's happening there is what's happening all over the United States, only it was accentuated by cold weather. And that is a crumbling infrastructure of this country. I lived in a house downtown Houston for 42 years. The power line that fed my house was installed in 1946. It didn't even have insulation on it. If there were ice storms or hurricanes and trees fell on the line, it would short them out because there was no insulation on them. Imagine what happens when cold weather and ice comes. Of course, it shorts the systems out. And of course, they built up areas where they're already on the edge of how much power they can supply. And when they needed all the extra heat, it couldn't take it, and down went the system. And of course, since it was Houston in the south of the United States, people weren't prepared and didn't know what to do because they never dealt with really freezing stuff. Up north, everybody knows. If the power goes off, you turn the water off to your house and you open the faucets in the bottom layer to get the system full of air instead of water, so if it freezes, there's no damage done. Well, nobody thought about that, so they just have these pipes full of water. Power goes out, they freeze. As soon as it warms up again and the water pressure comes up, they're all going to break because the ice cracked the pipes. That's where you see those videos of the ceilings fall down. I couldn't help. I mean, it was totally hilarious. Somebody put one on where they had that song, oh no, and then the ceiling collapses on some rich person's house. It looks like it was in West University or Bel Air in Houston, where a bunch of people that have a lot of money live. It's a matter of time. It's going to happen in the whole country, but it was accentuated there because they're not used to the cold weather. The power couldn't take it because it was an old corroded power system in a lot of the places. I mean, my house now is just a pile of 50 by 100 feet of dirt. They torn everything down, so there's nothing left there. And they'll have to run a new power line to the house. But the power line that's on top of the telephone poles, that's still the one that they put up in 1946, so it'll still short out unless they rewired the whole city. And who's going to pay for that? Just like the rest of the country. The infrastructure's crumbling. Extreme events are going to show it off. Ian Thornton says, Scotty, I got a PO125 code in my 01 F-150. Temperature gauge is lower than normal. Is it a severe problem? Well, not really. Just replace the thermostat. Odds are your thermostat is stuck open. It's supposed to be closed when it's cold, and as it warms up, it opens. But if it stays open, then the temperature gauge will run lower. Change it whenever you get a chance. It's not something you need immediate, but of course, you won't get that much heat out of the vehicle if the gauge is too low. You won't have hot enough water to warm you up. Over time, it can do damage, but that's over tens of thousands of miles. Don't worry about it until it warms up, or you have a heated garage and just put a new thermostat in the thing. Eduardo Mopar says, so I'm buying a new truck next week. Newer model 16 to 18. What do you think is the most reliable of American brands? Well, Ford, hands down, are the most reliable of American brands of trucks. There's no, if you're talking about normal trucks like a Ranger or an F-150. When you go into the large trucks, I do have to admit, the GMC large trucks are decent trucks. They're much better than the other Chevy trucks are. The 1500s are garbage, but the 2500s is a different story. They're commercial. The guy who put my heat pump here in Tennessee, he had a brand new 2500, and it was an excellent vehicle, but it is the 2500. It was a well-made truck. They're much better made than the 1500s. But if you're looking at a normal size F-150 or a Ranger, are the best American ones by far. Don't even think about Chrysler. They're putting out absolute junk. I have a 2017 Kia Optima, 86,000 miles. I had regular oil changes, but it burns 2 quarts of oil a week. The PCV didn't help. Any advice? Don't buy a Kia in the first place. They're poorly made. There's really nothing you can do. It's burning oil because the piston rings are worn out. They have a history of having weak piston rings on those. They've had engine problems up the wazoo, and they always say, oh, they're better made than they were. Well, that's a 17. It's not that old, and it's burning oil. And I see it all the time in my own customers' cars that buy Kias. You can listen to all the BS advertisements in the world to say how great a product is. Don't listen to them. Listen to a mechanic like me. I have no vested interest. Nobody pays me to say this is good, this is bad. I tell you from my experience of working on the things, and from working on them, I would never own a Kia. I got a Toyota, 2 Toyotas, and a Lexus sitting outside. buy. They're older ones because I'm cheap, but that's all I would buy. If they started making crappy products, I wouldn't buy them either, but they still make good ones. I've never bought a Kia. I probably never will. Rhode Island outdoors. Well, I'm headed to Rhode Island in a month. Scotty, what is your opinion on the Chevy TBI 4.3 Vortec engines? The engines were excellent engines. The throttle body injection, now, that was kind of a halfway version between carburetors and full fuel injection. They were bolted on where the carburetor was. They had a throttle body with either one or two injectors in it. They worked better than carburetors, but soon after, everyone went to multi-port systems where each cylinder has its own fuel injector on the intake manifold. Like the V8 would have 4 on one side and 4 on the other. So those engines are actually good engines. There's nothing wrong with the engines. It's just that it's kind of a crappy fuel injection system today. The modern ones work tons better. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.